Hey, it's Yanez, and welcome to another episode of Let's Rage Cougs. We're off the heels of the final Houston Cougars football game for the 2022 season. And what an interesting game it was. The Cougars come out victorious in the Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl. They come out, they pitch a second half shutout against the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, in which the Cougars came out victorious 23-16. We saw a lot of the last time we saw the connection from quarterback Clayton Tune and Nathaniel Tank Dell for the Cougars. They had 2 touchdowns overall in the season. They wrapped up with 17 total touchdowns for the 2022 campaign. Now, I know when it comes from the game perspective, probably didn't go as smooth as a lot of fans would have liked it to have wanted it to go, but at the end of the day, a win is a win. Thank you for those of you guys that are joining us here. I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. And if you, wherever you are in the country, there's a good chance that you're probably dealing with freezing weather. So we hope that you're staying warm as well. Joining me, as always, Dayon Dunlap. Dayon, how are you doing, sir?
Oh man, I'm doing well. Glad the Cougars pulled out the win. But like everyone else around the world, I'm trying to stay warm and it's cold.
Yes, sir. It is cold. And thank you, like I said, for those that are joining us, including one of our viewers that is watching live on the Houston Round Ball Review YouTube channel. And Orbita said, geez, I was anxious all game. It was horrible in the first half, but way to hustle by our guys in the second. So, Dan, where do you want to start? Do you want to start in the second half? Do you want to start in the first half? Because it was a tale of two halves for Houston, the team overall. Or, in particular, is there a specific player? Where should we start? Because there's a lot to get into about this
I
game.
mean, let's start with the second half, how the game ended, because it was kind of indicative. Really, the entire game was indicative of the how the entire season went. And
Yeah.
so, like, I wasn't really surprised. The offense sputtered throughout the entire game. Defense was bend but don't break. Made a lot of stops. Offense finally got it clicking at the end. And so, let's start with Clayton. I mean, his last game. So I think it's only right that we start with Clayton. And for the most part, I mean, he was very efficient. Made the right play per usual. Didn't have any turnovers. And early on, it looks like he wasn't as healthy early on. He got tackled, and it looked like he
Yeah.
may have been hampered a little bit. So I was kind of questioning if he should stay in or if they would keep him in, only simply because his health. But he, of course, throughout his entire career, showed his toughness, battled out, and he did a good job of closing the game. Really,
Yeah, he did have a scary moment there early in the game where it seemed like he might have. I don't know if it officially. It looked like he had tweaked his knee or some
yeah,
part of issue with his leg, and he was limping a little bit. And that right there, that's the worst thing you could have seen from Houston Cougars perspective. 'Cause like you said, this is going to be his last game. He didn't necessarily have to go out there and compete in the bowl game, but like you said, what Tune has shown throughout his entire career here at the University of Houston, his toughness, he stuck it out, and not only that, but he was able to. It's not like he was just became a different player in terms of him being maybe more passive or more protective. He was out there. There was a point in the second half when it was a third near the goal line, and he almost near dove for the first, trying to get the first
yeah.
down. They made it a 4th and 1, and he was just going out there for like he had been all season, trying to make plays to come out and help his team uh, go away with the win. Now on that play particular, it ended up being a 4th and short. That on the following play they got stuffed. But that's something. The way they came out in the third quarter, they went on a drive, they drove down the field, they connected with a touchdown. It kind of, like you said, I think that you put it right, you hit it around the head in terms of it was kind of a microcosm of the way the entire season had gone. They had to battle through adversity, they had to come together. They could have very easily gone into halftime down 10 to Louisiana and let go of the rope, and they didn't. And then that after they scored the first touchdown in the third quarter, it seemed, I don't know that it would be the right way to describe it, but kind of seemed like a hot potato game between the two teams of
Yeah.
trying to figure out who's going to want to win the game. There was punts here, and credit to the defense
Yes.
looking on their side of the ball because they forced 3 turnovers in that second half, and one of them came on a drive. It looked like Louisiana and Houston had
Score.
just tied it. It looked like they were on the verge of taking a go-ahead lead. At the worst case scenario, they would have a field goal, and they forced a fumble inside of their own 10-yard line, and then that allowed not only Louisiana to stay off the board, but kind of gave some more momentum back to the Cougars.
You're right, man. And like all year long, scrambling quarterback came in, and he gave them Houston problems, and they were able to
Yep.
move the ball down the field. But they were very opportunistic, and they got the takeaway and ball back in the offense's hands, and that was huge. And the offense, I mean, early the first half, typical like the year, they started off slow. But it was like I was wondering what's the game plan. It looked like the offense looked all year. I'm sure pretty much like they look on tape when Louisiana watched film, and so a lot of pass. I mean, although you look at the numbers, be like, well, they ran an X amount of times. They quick to go away with the run and allow the defenses just to play coverage. You drop coverage, then Clayton doesn't have anywhere to go with the ball because it's 8 in coverage, sometimes 7 to 8 in coverage, and so he has to pull down, maybe try to extend the play, and he's taking more hits than he probably should. But I was very intrigued with Coach Holgerson post game press conference. He talked about allowing Clayton Tune to call his own plays, and he said Clayton pretty much called the game and changed the play on the last play of the game to throw the ball to Tank. And Tank, of course, did what he's done all year, got open and caught the ball for a touchdown. So definitely going to miss that connection, going to miss Tank. But, man, what a drive to end the game. I'm glad it ended the way it did with a Tune to Dell pass for a touchdown. But oh man, Coug fans pretty much went for a whirlwind in that game, watching that game like they did throughout the entire season.
No, absolutely. I think that's interesting. You bring up that point in regards to Horgus. I think what that shows most importantly is the trust that he and Tune had been able to build. That he has a confidence in his quarterback to be able to go in there and be able to call the plays himself, and that's something that wasn't the case in previous years. And that just goes kind of the progression of their relationship over the course of the years. And like you said, for one final time, they be able to connect, and it's kind of again going back to kind of the theme that this game was kind of a small sample of the whole season. It's only fitting that those two were the ones that made the final play to put Houston over the hump, because especially on offense, a lot of times that was kind of the engine. Those two were the engines that ran the entire Houston Cougar offense, and today that was the case. Now, before we transition, I want to focus more specifically on Tank Dell, but for those of you that are joining us watching live, and oh my God, this might have ended up being perfect. We didn't plan this, but this is Let's Rage Cougs. You're watching the Let's Rage Cougs on the Houston Round Ball Review YouTube channel. And today's sponsors for the show will start out with Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976, with various locations across the Houston area. Be sure to visit Star Pizza either in person or online at starpizza.net, where you can click to order via their website and or just stop on and check out their menu items. Once again, that's Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976. And our other sponsor for today's episode of Let's Rage Cougs is HOUNIL. HOUNIL.com is a subscription-based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar student athletes and fans. HOUNIL helps Houston student athletes benefit from the new NIL rules. Athletes can create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. What the players need is for you to subscribe. Plans start at just $20 a month, and that money goes to the University of Houston. Athletes, subscribers will get one-of-a-kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on the national stage. Subscribe at HOUNIL.com, and as always, go Cougs. And we didn't plan this, but it works out fittingly, because here comes Ryan Monceau from GoCougs.com and the owner of HOUNIL. Ryan, how are you doing? How are you staying warm, first and foremost?
I am great. How are you there, Andy?
I'm great.
Well, that's good to hear. Okay, back to you.
And out to the field. No. So let's start. We just talked about the second half, the turnaround. Really, Dayon kind of said it perfectly, just in terms of the way this game ended up shaking out. Was kind of like it was microcosm of the entire season. They got off to a slow start. They were really getting killed by penalties early in regards to the Houston Cougars. The defense was bending but not breaking. They did give up, obviously, the opening drive where Louisiana went down the field and capped it off with a touchdown, and then they held them to field goals the rest of the way. And then the second half, Houston showed fight. They scored the opening drive touchdown, and then the defense pitched a shutout. Or your overall takeaways, initial takeaways from Houston, and now they are Independence Bowl champions, because you know how prestigious the Independence Bowl is.
Well, I'm a big Independence Bowl fan, Andy, and it's rude for you to talk that way about the nice people of Shreveport. They've done nothing to you. My takeaway is that this is how it was supposed to go. It was supposed to be ugly. It was supposed to be stupid. It was supposed to count on some good breaks. It was supposed to be some dumb penalties down the stretch. And then Clayton Tune figures out a way, and he involves Nathaniel Dell, and he called the play on the field, is what Dana said in the post game. You got, first off, Louisiana Lafayette stunk in the second half. I don't understand what they were doing, why they chose to go about the way they did. They almost looked like they were just playing ball control, just trying to run clock. U of H got super lucky on the Henry fumble.
Oh, yeah.
And then on the second Henry fumble, I just forgot that he fumbled again and Patrick Paul fell on it. The other one, the guy's hand was out of bounds. I mean, it could have ended way different. And you would have had a fan base just outside their minds if you lost that game. I mean, it was an ugly game. It just playing in this kind of weather, you can't expect anything to look great. And as a receiver, that ball coming at you is like a cinder block. Yeah. And last night in the Baylor game, I think it was way more obvious. Guys just did not want to catch the ball. But those are my takeaways. I still don't understand the run game for this program at all. Stacey Sneed did not get a carry against Tulsa. He only gets 6 today. Tune, Henry, and Campbell all had 45 yards each, which I don't think I've ever seen that. Otherwise, had you won this game by a touchdown or lost it by a touchdown in this kind of fashion, I don't think it really changes anything. It's just ugly. And I don't know where your appetite is for football going into the Big 12 if you're a fan, but this didn't help. I guess getting an 8th win is nice, and Dana is going to pump this team won 20 games in 2 years, but it's pretty bad. But you won.
Maybe it's his expectation. He always mentions outside expectation put on this team. So maybe he met his expectation. But yeah, Ryan, you're right on with the run game. Maybe it's just a token run game, just to hand it off, I don't know. But when I watch it, I was just watching it. They would stop running it, and then when they do run it, it's just the same run calls. I was wondering, like, what? I know Alton is so good, but outside of that, Snead had a good year. He had an explosive game. Then all of a sudden, he's not getting carries. Then, man, I don't know, but it's a win. A win is a win. And like I said a second ago, I mean, Clayton and Tank, I'm glad they figured it out at the end, specifically Clayton. It's good to hear Dana say that he was calling his own plays, and that's what I've been kind of clamoring for all year. A fifth-year senior in this offense for X amount of time, you want him to change plays and kind of own the offense, and it was good to see him do that towards the end. Just really classic Clayton, man. Battling, tough, not willing to go out, extending plays, really doing whatever he had to do to win the game. And so ugly, but I'm glad they got the win for sure.
My biggest takeaway on Clayton Tune is he's tough. And yeah. I will go out thinking of him as just a really tough guy.
Same.
And I don't know if he got the best coaching while he was here. I don't know if he got all he could have out of his talent, but the guy was tough. If you remember, he took 5 sacks in his first start against Memphis in 2018, and then comes back in that bowl game against Army, sacked him 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the guy just kept getting up, and he kept getting up. And then when King checks out, he comes and he plays hurt against Cincinnati that year. His hamstring was never right, but he battled. And through, and you can talk about the teams and the schedule they play, but he played tough, and he put this team on his back for at least 3 wins this year, for UTSA, for Memphis, and then today. Andy, anytime you want to say something, go ahead.
No, I was going to say in regards to that toughness level is something we had mentioned before you came on to the show that's kind of been his identity, that it's been consistent with him throughout. Now, what I was going to point out, that's something that's been mentioned by a few of reviewers, is the inconsistency in play calling. That's a comment by King Jaja, who says the inconsistency in play calling is what bothers him. And then in Orbita says if Toon is able to call better offensive plays than offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, that's not his official title, then that's really worrisome. That's something that seems to be a common theme in regards to this program going ahead, like you said, into the Big 12. Next year, they're not going to have Clayton Tune. They're going to have some new quarterback, whether it's Donovan Smith or anyone else, Lucas Coley, or potentially someone else that they bring. But so it's going to be kind of maybe not necessarily start from square one, but really close to it, because that relationship's not going to be there with, assuming that it will be Dana Holgorsen and potentially, who knows who's still calling plays, if it's still Dawson or if any of that changes. But that relationship has to get built, and that whoever's at quarterback next season is not going to have that luxury to be able to check plays, at least I wouldn't think after today. So what, if anything, because I'm pretty confident I know the answer from both of you, because there's not much that instills confidence from the coaching staff perspective, but what could the offense look like next season when you play callers, at least from a play calling standpoint? Because Dayon, like you said, especially when it comes to the running game, it seems to be, and you mentioned Stacey Sneed, I would think it's arguable to say that Stacey Sneed was the most consistent back throughout this season. And his carries, that it always seemed like it's kind of a running back by committee during game by games. Like, well, Tajon Henry's your turn to run, Brandon Campbell's your turn to run, and if someone catches fire, maybe we'll kind of run with you for the rest of the game. But there's not really that consistency or anything that instills confidence from a play calling standpoint.
Go ahead,
Yeah, you
Ryan.
can go first.
I think the play calling was very consistent this year. It was indescribable, and it was consistently that from day one. Dayon talked about the running game and how it's between the tackles most of the time. You saw two counters to the left side late in the game, probably both in the fourth quarter. I think both were on the winning drive. It was the first play, Clayton Tune, and then Henry ran it. And they had success running outside the tackles. And if every play call all year was to set those two plays up, then okay. But I don't think that's what it was. I would love to see them use the outside to run. But in 4 years, you just have not seen that. And you can't expect to start seeing it next year. You're going to have Alton. You're going to have Brandon Campbell. You're going to have Stacey Sneed. Henry, who has gotten first dibs in most games. I mean, Dana just really liked him. And if you're going to run between the tackles, the 5'7" guy's not the guy I would start with. Brandon Campbell had the run on fourth down where they get stopped. It was a high snap. And Dana has had a quick hook with him. He fumbled in a home game, maybe South Florida. After he broke one off and he fumbled it, I think, into the end zone or right at the end zone, and didn't see another rush the entire game. And that was in the first quarter, I believe. He's just had a really quick hook with him. Stacey Sneed just hasn't had the attempts. He's in for more pass plays than he's in for rush attempts. That might be an injury thing. I don't know, but it doesn't make sense to me. As far as next year, if it's Donovan Smith or Lucas Coley, you're going to see the quarterback run a lot more. And there's going to be a lot more design runs for him than there was for Clayton Tune. Even though Clayton ran it quite a bit, I think you're just going to, just by who they are, you're going to see the quarterback run it more. Your receivers, I just don't know what you can expect. Manjack is a really, I like him. I don't know if he's a take the game over kind of guy. And then I think with Alton McCaskill and the other guys that you're going to have, it just might be the same sort of thing you saw in the first half of this year of just trying to shorten games, of run the ball, to run the ball and shorten games. Because are you going to be able to block Big 12 defensive linemen in year one? Maybe not. And so, a quarterback that can run the ball and can get outside makes that a lot easier. But you'll have to see it proven before you can bet on it.
Yeah, like Ryan said, the play calling this year is pretty much consistently what it was. It seems easy to prepare for. Like I said before you got on, Ryan, it seems like that game plan that they had coming to the game of Louisiana was the same against Tulsa. And that's just me as observing watching it. And so, as a coach and staff, I'm sure it's easy to prepare for something that they've done for 10, 11, however many weeks it is. But as far as next year, I think, like Ryan said, you definitely see more quarterback run, more the quarterback design runs, more read option. And I think the quick passing game will be a lot more. I don't think it'll be as much deep shots unless it's Donovan Smith, because he has a stronger arm. And I haven't seen Lucas enough to be able to give my opinion as far as his arm, but I've seen enough of Smith I think he can make every throw. Is a little bit more athletic than Clayton, but he's just very turnover prone. And so I like the receivers. The run game, I think, the running backs probably be our strongest suit. But also to the point of having a short leash with Kemba, I really don't understand that. That's a very true. And I noticed that as well. And in my opinion, he's the most complete back that we had this season. He can run outside. He can run between the tackles. He can catch. And he was very explosive, and he can break tackles. That's what I've seen a lot in against the first game against UTSA. I was like, okay, this kid can really be special if he gets the volume of touches, but it kind of never fruition even with Snead. I think he is very elusive, has great vision and really good speed, but he never got the volume enough, only in a couple games, to truly flourish and see his full potential. But I think next year they will get back to trying to control the time of possession and win that battle, and trying to limit the defense as much on the time on the field, but really trying to control the time of possession and win that battle. But the receivers, I think Manjack is a complimentary receiver, and I think he'll be a good complimentary receiver to Sam Brown. I mean, hopefully he comes back. I don't really know his deal as far as they just suspended for the bowl game or what happened. You guys may be able to speak on that. I'm not sure. But I think Matthew Golden will take a step up. And some of these younger receivers, I've seen a couple of them. You don't know really how freshmen translate to the next level. But I think our top three, Jack Brown and Golden, and even Peyton Sawyer, he's shown that he got some speed. I think he'd be able to make some plays next year too.
Hold that thought real quick. We have to go on the other side of commercial break. Ryan, stay with us. I know your time's cutting short, but
I've got to wrap presents.
Don't go anywhere. You're watching Let's Rage Coogs on the Houston Round Ball Review YouTube channel.
Thank you for calling Star Pizza. This is Tim. How may I help you?
This is D.A. Jones. I'm calling to order some pizza.
Hey, Mr. Jones. Same order as last time?
Same order as last time.
Okay, and the delivery address?
Man, we over on Sac Ave.
Sac Avenue? Let me see if we even deliver there.
We right here on your map.
All right, we'll see you in about 45 minutes to an hour.
Hurry up, we hungry.
I'm hungry, man.
We eat the best pizza on Sac Ave.
I'm okay, though.
With it being the final Let's Rage Cougs of the football season here in 2022, of course, we had to get in that Sac Ave commercial sponsored Star Pizza, which is one of the sponsors for today's episodes of Let's Rage Cougs. Star Pizza, with multiple locations across the Houston area. Star Pizza is Houston's best pizza since 1976, and be sure to pay them a visit at starpizza.net, where you can order online and check out their main menu items. Once again, it's starpizza.com. And our other sponsor for today's episode of Let's Rage Cougs is And it's HOU-NIL. HOU-NIL. As the Cougars move to the Big 12, Houston will be competing with national players in basketball like Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, and more. And they'll be competing with those programs in football too. And like we saw today, there's a lot of catching up to do from maybe a recruiting standpoint. Those schools have fans that have built huge name, image, and likeness groups to get their athletes NIL compensation. That gives them a huge advantage over the University of Houston, where NIL is still in its infancy, but you can help Cougar athletes by getting involved. Go to HOUNIL.com to subscribe to player-created content like essays, videos, podcasts, and get access to private events with U of H players. Players are compensated for creating content, and fans get an inside look of their lives, and plans start at just $20 a month. That money helps the Cougars retain players to stay atop in basketball and help build momentum in football. HOUNIL.com. Subscribers get one-of-a-kind content straight from Cougar athletes, and subscribe today at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Coogs. So we had that commercial break. Ryan, what was your thoughts that you were going to say before the break?
I don't know. You can't let me just go and sit for 5 minutes. I can't remember things that long.
It was a 2-minute commercial break.
I feel like it was an hour, Andy. Come on. We're on the internet here. You can't lie.
I see the timer.
We were talking about the Big 12, and there's just not a lot of opportunity to run the clock out in the Big 12. Right. And everybody is throwing the ball all over the field. They're going fast. Yeah. And if you're running the clock out against those offenses, you're just going to get blown out. Yeah. Dayon brought up Matthew Golden, and I totally blanked on Golden. I thought we'd have seen more of him this year, to be honest. But Tank Dell got the bulk of the targets, and I thought they would have phased Golden in more and more as the year went on. But we're definitely going to see him a lot next year. UTSA is in week 1. I think Rice is week 2 and Sam Houston week 3 before TCU comes to town. Eventually, remember like a month ago, 2 months ago, we were told we were getting the Big 12 schedule the first week in December. It's the 23rd, and we still don't have it. There were a lot of things going on behind the scenes with Texas and OU about limiting their sort of exposure. If you played UT, you're probably not getting OU. If you host UT, you're definitely not hosting OU. U of H is going to host UT, not going to play. I don't think going to play OU, definitely not hosting them. But eventually, we're going to see what the schedule looks like and see how this team can make it work. I think that's a really interesting subject, but I don't think anybody's going to pay attention to it for 9 months. It's going to be the last week of August before anybody really cares about football around here. I think attentions are going to turn really fast to basketball, and why not?
And to add on to your point in regards to Golden, I think a big part of it too had to be that rib injury where I think he missed. Can't remember if it was 3, but it kind of came in the middle of the season, and then he didn't come back till might have been 2 games he missed because he missed one, and then they had the bye week. But that extended layover basically cutting out most of his October, maybe played a part too. But I agree as well, Dayon and Ryan, both of you guys' points. I think Golden certainly has the capability to be able to be that next go-to receiver for Houston, and it's just about continuing to progress throughout the offseason and into next season and a much more challenging schedule in regards to conference play.
Yeah, he missed 2 games and started 8 of the last 11. So he missed 2 games. He came off the bench against Temple. But yeah, I think he's definitely got to be your number 1 guy going into next year. So that's where you're going to run the passing game through. And we'll see how that goes.
I think probably be the number 2, probably at least in receptions, is Alton. Just to look at the number of catches he got his freshman year, I think they're going to lean on him heavily, not only running the ball, but catching the ball as well. But another position group that I'm interested to see how they reload because they've been so successful with this group is the D-line group. You look at the success that they've had with sacks, pressures, and then players getting drafted. Now moving into the Big 12, I'm really, really intrigued to see how they reload with that group, especially with the players we have leaving, Jones and Paris. I think Caesar's coming back. Bell is gone. And so I'm really going to keep an eye out on if they can recruit well or if they have people in the stable we just don't know about, but how they're going to impact really on the defensive line, because there's been the strength of the defense over the last – since Ed Oliver left, honestly.
Yeah. Brian Early loves Jeremy Caldwell, loves him. And so watch out for him. You're going to have Chidozie back. Yeah. As you said, Nelson Caesar. I think Cedric Williams is back, but I can't 100%
I think so too.
Say on that. They've done a really good job developing guys. D'Anthony Jones, who is an HOU NIL favorite, a first ballot Hall of Famer for us, he is the perfect example of guys that Brian has been able to develop. He came out of Long Beach, high energy, high motor, but did not have the skill set that was needed to play at this level, but developed it. And he is in the backfield more than any guy I can ever remember on a more consistent basis, especially this year when he's starting more games and getting more snaps. His win rate is really high against tackles. So you're going to miss that for sure. Nelson Caesar has to take that next step. Yeah. I think they believe he can. I think they believe Jeremy Caldwell is going to be in that next group as well.
Brian, as we start to wrap things up, one thing I did want to get your thoughts before you head out is about that transfer in regards to the kind of the headline earlier in the week on Tuesday about Donovan Smith. How do you feel? What do you feel about that move, him joining the Houston Cougars, and what that potentially could look like going forward into the Big 12?
I think that gives you a starting point. You needed a guy. I think they're going to take another out of the portal. Mm-hmm. It may not come in this window. There's another window that opens in May. It may come then. They may find out in the spring they don't have exactly what they want. And but I think they're going to take another. I mean, you have the freshman coming in from Georgia, but you really don't have a lot of young talent there. It needs to be 5 or 6 guys in that room, not 2 or 3. So you've got to keep bringing guys in. On Smith, I'm not sure what to think. I will admit I had not watched a lot of Texas Tech this year. I do know that he fell down the depth chart a little bit after converting that 4th and 20. It seems like his season kind of went the wrong way. I am curious to see what can happen, but I'm always alarmed when somebody slides down a depth chart and then they transfer out and they go to a school that I'm interested in or that I'm covering or whatever. Why is that? What is the reasoning for it? And it's not always a nefarious thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just I want more information, and we just don't have any. We haven't heard from Dana about transfers or about recruiting or anything. So it's just hard to tell where it is and what's happening there.
And I think it'd be healthy competition because just like you, I think it's a reason that he fell down the depth chart. Like, I don't know. I know he has problems with turnovers, but you still want to be able to kind of judge for yourself. And so I'm intrigued to see him. And I don't think with a player like him, you come in, you guarantee him a starting job to get him to come to Houston. I don't think you have to do that with a player like that with his stature. I think
you should never do it for anybody, frankly.
I agree.
Nobody should be guaranteed a starting spot.
Oh, I agree 100%. 100%. But I think it's going to be healthy competition between him and Lucas. And I'm glad both of them have multiple years of eligibility because then they can grow with the program. They can develop and grow with the program and with the receiving core. I'm glad they didn't go a route of getting a grad senior, but like you guys just said, they may bring someone else in. But I hope it isn't someone on a 1 year eligibility left. They get to start. I mean, well, if it's more success to the football team, then I would be all for it. But just in my opinion, I think it's better to get someone that can grow just for the future. Like Max Duggan, for example, for TCU, he's a 4-year starter. He's been with that team. Didn't start the year as a starter, but he ended up being inserted as a starter, and the story goes on to where they are now. And so I just can't wait to see it, man. I don't think that he is the penciled-in starter. And some people was asking me, "Oh, is he gonna?" No, I don't think so. He has to earn it, just like everyone else.
Dana does like penciling in that starter. When he came here, Derek King was a starter. There was no question. And then after Clayton filled in for him, he was the starter, no question. There was never really like a competition for it. Yeah. And I would really like to see that. Yeah. And I would not be opposed to a grad transfer if they can win the job. You've got this year is a sort of a different kind of year, moving up from this level to that, and you've just got to have whatever guy can turn plays into first downs into touchdowns. And I just don't think I don't think they would be limiting it, but I would not. I want to see development because there's not a lot of development in this program as it is, but I would like to see guys develop. I would like to see young quarterbacks stay. Sophie Massoud and Maddox Kopp have both transferred once, and Kopp now twice. But I would like to see these guys develop. And you know, you played most of this year with Holman Edwards at second string. Ike was second string last year, and these are not guys that should be one play away, not where they were in that part of their development. So I think you need a guy like we just talked about with Clayton. That kid was so tough that it took him getting completely bell rung against Grambling last year to come out of a game. And you're just not gonna get that lucky. Yeah. And so you've got to have two guys that can do it, and you know, maybe Lucas Coley's one of them, but we haven't seen it because Clayton Tune just hasn't come off the field really.
Yeah, like Ryan just said, he said it perfectly. I want to see development because you haven't seen it. We haven't seen it, and that's really what I was hitting at. I want to see development specifically from the quarterback position. You hit it right on the head with that.
Brian, before you head out, I want to leave you. It's kind of a comment. I think it's interesting because Marek, who's one of the viewers on YouTube, watching on the Houston Round Ball Review YouTube channel, he's kind of put his Christmas list: a new head coach, a new coaching staff, a good replacement at quarterback, consistency in defense, improved offense, better O-line play, better secondary. That's a long list. So I'm going to toss it over to you. I'm going to keep it short and simple. If you could only pick one thing, what would you have at the top of the Ryan Monceau Christmas list in regards to the football team heading into next season?
Realistically, you want two quarterbacks that can play.
Yeah.
And you're not getting a new head coach. I cannot imagine you're going to see any coordinator changes. You may see some position spots change. Brian Early could get a bump, you know, if somebody wanted to take a chance, but they're really well paid, to be honest. I just don't think most of those are reasonable at this point, where this program is, and with the leadership, both in the program and in the athletics department as a whole. I just don't see a lot of rocking of the boat. If I were you, I would get really involved in this American Girl doll that's a much more reasonable thing to expect for Christmas. I just was exposed to this week, and I think it's an outrage, and I think it's way too much money, and I think children are ripping off their parents, but I think it's a much better deal than expecting Dana Holgerson or Shannon Dawson or Belk to leave.
We'll get you some sparkle glass cleaner as well.
There you go,
your
some
Christmas
sparkle glass cleaner.
tree. Absolutely, Dan. I'll toss it over to you. What would you have on your list in regards to the football team heading into the Big 12?
I mean, I got to agree with Ryan. I would have to say quarterbacks, at least two quarterbacks that can play and get the job done. That's it. I mean, the secondary was young. I think Jalen Emery showed promise. In my opinion, I think he's probably our next really good corner. From what I've seen, he played really good over the end of the season. So other than that, just quarterback play. I think we got the skill positions are going to be good. Offensive line is pretty much intact. I think they will have chemistry, to say the least. The rest is to be seen as far as they can compete in the Big 12. But quarterback's important, man. I would definitely go with the quarterback position for sure.
Well, I think that's interesting something, and Ryan, you know this in terms of what Dana Holgerson has said throughout the season when it comes to needing to bring in talent transfers in regards to up front at that offensive line position. He said that it's something that they continue to improve on as they transition over to the Big 12. But in regards to the quarterback specifically, at the beginning of the month, I'm not entirely too sure when exactly it was, but Dana Holgerson himself mentioned how from the transfer portal, obviously they were looking to bring in a quarterback, which one of them already turned out to be Donovan Smith, but in perfect world, he wanted to bring in at least two. And that's interesting that you bring up, Ryan. It potentially, if it doesn't come within the next few days or weeks, it could come after the spring, which would be interesting to get a transfer in that way. But I think that's something that's certainly high on the list from this coaching staff per se, because at least that's what Holgerson has said leading up to this game and into the offseason.
Yeah, I think it's just vital to get another one, and have three guys that can push each other. Coley is wholly unproven, and frankly, I think Donovan Smith is too. You know, you've got to be able to do it for 14 weeks in the fall. It's not 1 or 2 or 3 games. It's got to be consistency, and you need that from your point or your quarterback. I'm thinking Kelvin Sampson told me something. He says this a lot. He says that the head coach, the best player, and the point guard can never have a bad game. They can never have a bad practice. And I think that's so vital from your head coach and your quarterback on the football field. They can't have bad practices. They can't take games or days off. They can't take plays off. And you've had a warrior here for 4.5, 5 years that has been that. He may not have succeeded every time, but he was a warrior.
Yeah.
And you need guys that come in with that mentality, that exude that. And, you know, it just depends on who you get and how they are developed. And that is going to be so important for this program to go into the Big 12. And isn't this weird to say that the next game you play, you're a member of the Big 12?
It is weird.
You know what else is weird, Dayon? Is that in the last 45 years, Dana Holgerson has more bowl wins at U of H than any other coach. His 2.
Damn.
Bill Yeoman had 1 in the last, after 1977. And no one else has had more than 1. Sumlin had 1. Tony Levine had 1 when he took over for the 2011 team. David Gibbs had 1. Tom Herman had 1. And now Dana has 2. Major never had 1. Jenkins never had 1. Pardee, Art Briles, Kim Helton. I'm certain that will be a stat that we hear a little bit about in the next 8 months.
I'm sure it will too. I'm willing to bet that's something we'll hear. I'm willing to bet.
That's a stat that says much more of what the status of the program has been over the course of the last 45 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got 6 bowl wins since 2008. It's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than it had been for 30 years. But a coach is always getting out of town after he leads a team to a big season. And that's just not where the program is with Dana Holgorsen.
Well, with that last point just being said, you think Houston, well, just kind of looking past Dana, well, because I think they'll be able to retain Dana as long as he wants to stay and as long as they'll keep him. But after his tenure, you get a bigger coach or a bigger name coach, quote unquote. You think Houston would be able to retain them? Because that's been a problem. Like we just said, after a big year, a good win, then coaches would leave for bigger conference. Now Houston's in the Big 12. You think that's something that the problem that they'll still have occur?
It just depends on what's the important thing at the time.
Okay.
U of H has proven they're willing to spend the money. And they'll be in the top half in the Big 12 in coaching salaries. And they're going to spend on the staff as well. If you get this new facility built, you should not have issues with facilities. TDECU lacks in a lot of ways, especially on the 300 level, but it is enough for what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, and this is not to push HOU NIL, but it becomes about NIL.
Yeah.
And U of H has put NIL on the back burner, and while other schools are putting it way out front. And you can't compete with programs that are focusing their efforts and their resources to build these NIL groups if you're not doing it. And in basketball, you're going to see this push after this season of, you're hearing it with football coaches about tampering and things like that. Mm-hmm. You're going to start to hear that with some of the young players at U of H. And it's going to be weird for U of H fans to fully comprehend that people want to steal your players, but it's going to happen. JVA Francis is the perfect example. That kid is developing in front of our eyes, and he's getting better every single game. Yeah, he is doing things. He did things against McNeese that he wasn't mentally able to do 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
Physically able to do either. He didn't block himself on the bottom of the rim. And so he's improving. And there is going to be a market for a guy like him.
Yes.
For Emmanuel Sharp, who can get open and shoot the three. There's a market for that.
Yep.
Will U of H be able to retain them? Now, I think both of those guys are locked into the program, and I'm not suggesting anything is happening. But those are the type of guys that big programs with big NIL budgets are going to want. You don't see that with football right now because there's just not and I don't want to say there's no one worth stealing.
No, but I see the point.
But there's no one that, is going to command some huge market besides maybe Alton McCaskill.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
If we're to leave. Now, I don't think Alton's leaving. I do think you will see some changes in the next week in the portal with U of H football since the bowl game. A lot of guys got in this game, and maybe they have some film, and maybe they have a desire to leave. Maybe they're going to be asked. But you're still going to see a lot of changes, and I think you're going to see probably some more high school signings and definitely some transfer signings. I don't think the portal has worked out like they've wanted it to with football. The Sam Khan article was focused in The Athletic, was focused on being the first person to target these people in the portal, be the first to offer them, be the first in their ear. And that hasn't translated. Donovan Smith was your third player. You had the guy from UT, I think he was an offensive lineman, the Alabama kicker, which is not a priority, and then Donovan Smith, who is a priority.
Yeah.
I talked for a long time there, guys. Sorry about that. Star Pizza.
No.
Well
Actually, you said it perfectly because I was about to do the commercial break. But before that, I was going to ask you, are you good to stick with us throughout the commercial break?
Yes. And okay. Star Pizza.
Perfect. And that basically makes you a co-host of today's episode. But
what does that pay, by the way?
To the commercial break we go.
Hey, what'd you order? Oh, pizza and tea. Shouldn't it be ready by now?
Oh man, I guess we'll get the lunch special.
Big Hawk, he had his kind of shining moments today during the ESPN broadcast. They started mentioning him a lot. They started mentioning him. I don't know, my audio was kind of turned out. When in regards to Big Hawk, he had his big shining moment on national stage on ESPN during the broadcast in the second half. But that commercial was of Star Pizza, who is one of the sponsors of today's episode in Let's Rage Coogs, streaming on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel with various locations across the Houston area. Be sure to check out Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976, and pay them a visit online at starpizza.net. And our other sponsor for today's episode of Let's Rage Coogs, HOUNIL, just talked about name, image, and likeness in the University of Houston. And HOUNIL.com is a subscription-based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar student athletes and fans. HOUNIL helps Houston athletes benefit from the new NIL rules. Athletes can create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. What the players need for you is to subscribe. Plans start at just $20 a month, and the money goes to the University of Houston athletes. Subscribers will get one-of-a-kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on a national stage. Subscribe at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Coogs. Ryan, since you're sticking with us, I'm going to go to you first because we just want you to continue talking. But we're going to focus on the defense per se, because something that Dayon and I talked about before you hopped on was really the turnaround they were able to do in the second half. That's something you tweeted out, that over the course of the game, it was a lot of bend, but they never broke. And they started making plays towards the second half, something that really we didn't see a lot throughout the course of the season in regards to coming away with forcing three turnovers on Louisiana, which were pivotal, including one when the Raging Cajuns were marching down the field. It looked like they were just destined to score a touchdown on that drive. They ended up coughing up the ball inside the 10-yard line, which was a pivotal play in the game that not only kept them off the board, but allowed Houston to get the ball back and drive themselves. A lot was said this season in regards to defense from the drop-off of where it was a season ago. There were some people calling for the head of Doug Belk, which both Dayon and I weren't necessarily on board of that train, but I think it's interesting, Dayon, you mentioned Jalen Emery. The defensive line, something that Brian Early has been a key figure from that defensive side perspective, has been one of the areas that Houston has been able to develop players from a football perspective. Dan, I'll go to you. I know, Brian, I said I was going to go to you first, but Dan, I'll go to you first, because in regards to the defense and Doug Belk, do you feel like a game like this is in the second half, that's something that shows this is what Doug Belk, if you give him enough time, there's a lot of new players and new roles that potentially give them another full offseason. They could look much more like the 2021 defense than they did for a bulk of the 2022 season.
I don't know if this game shows that per se, but I think overall, if you look at the collection of young players who was inserted into the lineup due to injuries or due to whatever the case was, I think he's shown that he can coach them up to get them in a position to make plays. I mean, if you look at overall outside most of the games outside of the SMU that automatically sticks out to my head, the defense played well enough to win games. I think it's just overall the teams have to play more complementary football. If the defense gives up a drive, offense, you have to go drive. And so forth. I think they got to play off each other better. They did it at time in spurts, but overall it wasn't more collective. But overall, I mean, I think Doug Belk, he's an awesome leader as well as coach. I think the players really, really, truly believe in who he is as a leader and as a man, also as a coach. I think this is his second year fully calling plays defensively, and so he's still developing as well. And so I just trust in what we've seen from him early with the collection of talent that he has. He's proved that he can coach them and get them to play at a high level versus this year, how it's not so much that NFL talent, and still have some talent, injuries, and all different things. He still kind of pieced it together to show flashes of what can be. And so I think the future is bright. I'm sure he's an awesome recruiter. I'm not sure if he's the lead recruiter and getting a lot of these defensive guys, but I'm seeing some defensive guys that they were getting, and I'm sure he has something to do with that. But I think overall he's shown enough to have something to build on for sure.
Ryan, some question to you in regards to Belk. This is a guy that there's a big reason why they had to give him that extension that makes him the highest coordinator for Houston perspective. It puts him on par because they were scared that he was going to get poached from a bigger program and turn around a season later. A lot of fans were frustrated with the way the defense had performed. What do you think about overall what the defense showed in this game and going forward about potentially they started to show enough flashes that maybe there's some optimism in regards to that side of the ball come 2023?
So Belk looked like a genius when he had 2 shutdown corners.
Right.
It's amazing how smart you are. Luke Fickell looked like a genius when he had Sauce back there just shutting people down.
And Kobe Bryant, that was on the other side.
Right, Kobe Bryant. I couldn't remember his name. They look like geniuses, right? And then when you don't have that, and you lose guys to injury, a lot of guys to injury for the 3rd year in a row, 4th year in a row. That's a weird thing that maybe can be addressed some way. But I think there's a lot of young talent, and there's some young talent that really interests me. Jamal Morris is a guy that really interests me, the linebacker. I love his story. I've met him in person one time, and I was blown away by the guy, and just how authentic he seemed to be. He had a breakout game today. He forced a fumble. Obviously, they saw something on film because you had 2 guys kind of just shove their hand in to the side and kind of not even peanut punch, but just with a flick of a wrist, cause fumbles today. Cedric Williams was kind of out of position with his body when he caused his. And it's just stunning that they gave up what looked like to be just shouldn't happen fumbles. I didn't think Louisiana was very good offensively at all in the game. They did drive on the first drive, but a few small adjustments by U of H, and they were wholly ineffective. I think penalties killed them in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
they had a 15-yard penalty in an earlier drive in the first half, I guess. A personal foul on a receiver who went and hit Donovan Mutin after the play was over, and it just made no sense why you would do that, and it cost you a touchdown, or cost them a touchdown, and that is lack of discipline. They obviously were going at it all week with U of H players and back and forth, and it was a lot of chippiness in the game. But surprisingly, and I'm going to just U of H didn't take that bait. You see when things go that way, this team has been the team that's taken the bait, and they didn't today. And that is surprising, and it's good. But I was never as high on Belk as others, and I've never been as low to the point of firing him like some others might be. I think that when you have those guys, you had Logan Hall last year, you had Marcus Jones. I mean, those are top 33 draft picks, just the 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And that makes a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
And so if Doug Belk has that kind of talent and has a year like this, then yeah, that's a problem.
So you would say much more. It was maybe not necessarily due lack of talent overall, but just in terms of the circumstances, the injuries, it's much more a reflection of that than maybe Belk's coaching ability per se.
I think so. But it also, at the same time, in the second half of the year, you gave up a lot of points to an SMU team that's and you gave up a lot of points to a Tulsa team that had pretty much already fired their head coach. That can't happen, I mean, it was obvious that he was gone, and you had a first-year head coach in Rhett Lashley at SMU that threw up 77 points. That can't happen. And the fact that Louisiana Lafayette did not just keep throwing the ball was shocking. And, I mean, this team has an obvious deficiency. And if I'm an offensive coordinator or a head coach, I'm attacking that until they completely prove that they've patched that hole. And U of H didn't prove that, but ULL just didn't attack it.
That very first drive, that quarterback made some throws that you can't defend. To his credit, that especially that touchdown over Donovan Mutant, that's a throw you can't defend. And also, it's another. I think it was a third down route. I think if Donovan Mutant was in coverage as well, if my memory serves me well. But also to Jamal, to your point about Jamal Morris, and also I want to add Manny Nunnery. I think he also had a good game. Another young linebacker who struggled at times during the season, but you've seen flashes of his career athleticism. I think with the experience, he's been able to read plays. The game has kind of slowed down for him. And so I think I agree. I think it just a managing of injuries and a lack of experience and not having that elite talent like we both alluded to with the likes of Pepe, Marcus Jones, Logan, and et cetera, et cetera. And more importantly, the depth up front. I think that caused so much because when you aren't getting as home as fast as they were last year and early in the year, that forces the DBs to cover longer. And so I think that's another effect that played in a part because last year you look at DeAnthony Jones led the team in sacks, but he was primarily just a third down rusher. This year he was an every down DN, and they didn't have that depth and ability to keep him fresh, to keep Nelson Caesar fresh. Then you look when Pierce went down, he was the guy that kind of would give those other two guys rest, well, give each other rest. They were able to play off each other, I should say, to kind of give them fresh. And so the D line is just as important as it is on the back end, I think, as well.
Put a pin in it as we near we passed the hour mark here. Let's Rage Cougs, the final 2022 post-game show of the Houston Cougars football team. Like Ryan alluded to earlier in the show, the next time we do a Let's Rage Cougs for the football team, it will be covering a Big 12 Houston Cougars football team. But once again, the final score, Houston Cougars victorious in the Independence Bowl. They pull out the 23-16 victory over Louisiana, and kind of the final play, at least the final offensive play, or the penultimate offensive play, because technically they did have the kneel down. That's all the go-ahead score. Clayton Tune connected with Tank Dell. That was reception, or the duo's reception, number 17 of the year. That's really been, again, like we said at the beginning of the show, Dayon, those two, they were kind of the face of the entire offense for the Houston Cougars. And it was fitting because we knew that Clayton Tune, this is his final year. It's his senior year. His final game, he's not going to play for the Cougars once again. Tank Dell, he's also his final game. He's going to be entering the NFL draft, and he'll be looked to get his name called in come April. But for Dell specifically,
Ryan, where do you think they both get? Where do you think Tank gets drafted? And do you think Clayton has a chance to get drafted?
I have no clue. I don't really follow the NFL. I certainly don't follow the draft. That's just it's like recruiting to me. I just don't get it. I don't care. I'm focused on those years there on Cullen, and then but I think Clayton Tune is the prototype of what you want, like what the NFL wants in a quarterback. He's just a big, tough, well-built guy. And I think if his life ends up like Case Keenum, where he's in the league for 11 years, that's not so bad. Yeah. That pension's pretty good. Yeah. So I think he has the opportunity to latch on. I don't know if it's a draft pick. I don't know if it's free agency. But I think that he has a definite chance. I don't have any clue about Dell, but I mean, we've seen it for so long that he's just he's just a gamer, and he'll go across the middle, and I think that matters.
Well, I think that's an interesting point in regards to Dell, because when you look at the top receivers that are getting out of this year's class, it'll be part of this year's NFL class. Dayon, I'll go to you first. Do you feel like he could be one of those top 10 receivers or even beyond that? Do you think he's on that top 10 threshold, or do you think he's below that?
I have to look at the list right on top of my mind. I would say he's in that upper echelon of slot receivers. You got people from like Smith and Jigma coming from Ohio State, who's the number one outside receiver. But I think it's broken down with inside and outside. I think he's going to be one of the at least top 5, maybe top 2 slot receivers in this draft. You look at the likes of Hunter Renfrow, people like that. I think he's better than him. Other people like that, I think he's going to be on the upper echelon of slot receivers, and he'll have his chance to get his name called in the draft.
Marquez Stevenson, when he entered the draft, I can't remember, he was a 6th-round pick, correct?
I think
Or
so,
7th?
yes. 6.
Around there by the Bills. I think this would be an interesting question for the panel. Do you guys feel that what Dell was able to do at Houston surpassed what Stevenson was able to do during his time with the Cougars?
I think so, simply on the strength of there's no injury history with Dell at Houston. He pretty much stayed healthy. He showed he can complete as far as route running, ability to not only catch on the outside, win on the outside, but like Ryan just mentioned, go across the middle. And he has the ability of punt return, just like Marquez Stevenson. I think Speedy is more explosive, but I think overall, just answer your question, I think he has more strictly on him staying healthy.
Ryan, you got anything to add?
I completely agree. I have no idea. I really don't. I mean, Stevenson never had the numbers that Dell has put up. He didn't have the 90 and 100-yard receptions and the 17, I guess, touchdowns this year.
17 touchdowns this season.
I think Marquez's best year was 9. It may have been 10. So I mean, he never put those numbers up. They're about the same size, I would guess. I think Stevenson may be just a little taller. But I think Dell has proven himself in the return game. Now, they didn't use him so much in the return game the second half of the season. I don't think he returned kicks for the most part. And then the punt situation was pretty weird in the second half of the year. With flipping him and Peyton Sawyer, and then Sammy Brown, I think, returned some. But I think he has that ability. And while not Marcus Jones, I think he can be a benefit and make a roster because of his receiving. But, you know, when Ty goes to the runner, it's that ability in special teams that could help him out.
I think that the other thing that Dell has going for him, to look last year in the American Athletic Conference game when they played Cincinnati, I know it's going back a year, but when he had to go against Kobe Bryant and against Sauce Gardner, he still put up his numbers. He had 9 receptions for 152 yards and a touchdown against the Bearcats a season ago. I think that goes a long way too. When competing against that NFL level talent, he didn't necessarily shrink in that moment. So that's something that scouts look for. And he still has, I always forget what game he's going to play in. I think it's going to be the Senior Bowl that they'll be participating in. So he still has a long time from now until April to continue to build up his draft stock. And I think that potential is there for him for a team to fall. And it only takes one. You know, that's the old cliche saying, for them to fall in love. And he still has a lot of room to continue to develop at that next level. But as we wrap things up here on Let's Rage Coogs, the final for the 2022 football season, again, the final score, Houston came out victorious, 23-16. We'll put a bow on it. So, again, we've hit on all the points. Clayton Tune and Tank Dell, they did their thing on offense. The defense shut out. So, I'll just leave it point blank simple. How would you describe the 2022 football season? Because I know my word is inconsistent. There's a lot of other words that people can use and a lot of different ways to describe it. But how would you guys describe this season, if you could, in one word?
Go ahead.
One word, I would say. I mean, I don't want to say inconsistent because they were consistent with what they were this year, and so
They were consistently inconsistent, up and down all
right, no,
season.
right, no, I get what you, I get it, man. That's a tough one for me. I would say, I don't know, man. I can't put one word on it. I can't. That's a tough one. I don't know. What you say, Ryan?
Over.
There you go. Finito.
That's perfect.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
All right, you right there, Richie. Rich. So glad the season over, and I love college football.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 77-91. On to next season. That's all I'm gonna say after this.
There it is.
Would you guys say, in orbit, mediocre? That's the word he used to describe it.
That's a reasonable word.
Yeah.
Would you guys?
That's it. That's a reasonable. Yeah.
When we all put our expectations on this team, I did not have mine at 8 wins and a week in Shreveport.
Me either.
I don't know what other expectations Dana are talking about, but that's not it.
Right.
When you talk about these 2 great years that he's had, you have a trophy from Birmingham and a trophy from Shreveport, and I just don't think that's where people really have focused what they wanted or what they expected when you got him from West Virginia 4 years ago this week.
It's a great point, but that's going to do it for today's episode of Let's Rage Cougs. Ryan, we thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know you have to go wrap up presents. So you got
I do. Do you have a room on the Mattress Mac jet when you're going to Tulsa this week? Because I just need 1 seat, and I have a very small carry-on. But
no, because the windshield wipers are not going to work, and it was Delta. It was
okay.
Don't get me started. And on that, you know what? For that, I was gonna give you a time to plug, and you won't even get. No, I'm joking. Where can people find you? I know it's getting cut off by the
HOU, the NIL. There you go. Well,
Ryan from GoCoogs.com.
That's me. GoCoogs.com. Been around 5 years, doing some pretty good stuff, and then some. And then HOUNIL.com. We're working with players, with athletes. We're making content, videos. If basketball players are getting back Christmas night, they have to report at 7 o'clock. At 7:15, we're getting in there and we're recording content. Kelvin Sampson doesn't know this yet, but they're not practicing for Tulsa. They're doing content with us. That is breaking right here on this show. But that's where our focus is, and we're going to continue to build the content for U of H fans. We're going to help U of H athletes build their brands. You know, this isn't just about content. This is about, we want to help them get other NIL deals. If we can stack them on top of each other, Lincoln Coogs, Star Pizza, us, whoever else comes, that's how you win in NIL. And that's what we're trying to do for U of H athletes. HOUNIL.com.
And Dayon, as always, thank you for joining. Where can people find you?
Find me on all social media platforms, of course, at Dayon Dunlap, like it shows on the screen. And I mean, it's go Cougs. Football season is over, like Ryan said. Onward and upward, like Chris says to the basketball, man. Now getting ready to support a winning program. And so I'm excited. Love all the content that Ryan and Go Cougs have been putting out, the HOU NIL that they're doing. It's all great, man. Just like us on this platform, we're pro Houston, pro Cougs, and we're trying to expand not only us as a group, but also expand the knowledge and talk on Houston sports overall. And so glad you guys for taking your time out today on your Friday and joining us for this post Let's Rage Cougs last episode of football. But follow me at Dayon Dunlap.
And as always, I do want to take the time. Well, first, people can find me on Twitter at Yanez_5. But I do want to give a shout out to Chris Gardner for allowing us to use his Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel for the entire journey. And a big shout out. We got to the end in regards to the football season. for this episode specifically, a shout out to HOUNIL.com and Star Pizza, but also Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective, and 5 Star Properties. That they were the initial primary sponsor way back when, September 3rd, when the Cougars, there's still a lot of optimism in the air in regards to the season playing out. They were the first primary sponsor, and then the Saxenian family as well that took over the primary sponsorship after, I want to say, the first week in October. It was around that time, but without them, they helped us out get this thing off the ground. And obviously, without all the viewers that may be watching live on the Houston Ron Bar Review YouTube channel or listening to the audio only versions wherever you get Pods Time at Jamma, we wouldn't be able to do this show without you guys. And Ryan, since you are from here from HOUNIL, thank you as well, because without your guys' support, it'd be much tougher to be able to do a show like this. So you guys help support us continuing to cover University of Houston athletics, where really they can't have it. Who else is doing a post-game show on Dayon? I know you said a winning program with the men's basketball team, but the football team went 8-5. That's a winning program too. But as always, Ryan, do you have anything else to say before we close out?
I don't. Thank y'all guys. Appreciate it.
Dayon, as always, how do we close out here on Let's Rage?
Always,
Coogs?
baby. Go Coogs.